Hi, I'm Mike Evanoff, and we're talking about Google Earth Enterprise. And in this video, we're going to talk about some troubleshooting steps, just some things that you can do to maybe help figure out what's going on with your Fusion server or your Google Earth server. So the biggest troubleshooting tool that we have a script called GEE check, and that's located under opt Google share support, and here we have GE check, and it's a directory, and you'll notice that we have a lot of different files in that directory, but one of them is the geecheck.pl. It's a Perl program, and so like the best troubleshooting tool that we have is that GE check, and it will go and check your disk space, it'll check your domain registration, it'll check your IP, it'll check versions. I mean, it'll check everything that you need to check. So we run it. Best to run it as root if you can, if you have root access. Otherwise, if you run it without root, some of the things won't work quite right, but sudo GE check. And that's going to just scour my computer, and it's going to learn all the information that we need. And if you are going to submit a trouble ticket to the support team, so if you have a problem that's so bad, you're going to support a ticket into the support portal, it's best to run GE check ahead of time and just copy and paste this information into your ticket so that whoever is running or trying to solve the problem on the support portal will be able to see all of these outputs. And so we can go up to the top here, and it starts telling us what version of Linux I'm running, the fact that I have bad host names or different. So what we're running here, I'm running an Amazon instance, running a Fusion server on an Amazon instance. So the host names are going to be all kind of crazy, and it's telling me this right now. I mean, I have a whole bunch of bad host names, which I already knew. No firewall is running. And then which version of Linux I'm running, which distribution. So this kind of information is really, really helpful for the support team. So they don't have to come back and ask you 10 different questions. This will give you all the information. How many CPUs you're running on, how much disk space you have, where you're publishing to, and all that sort of stuff is included in this. So this might be something just useful for you to look at and scan through. GE check has a relatively high false positive rate. So for example, if you run this on the Google Earth server, it'll tell you a bunch of errors that Fusion isn't installed. It's like, well, yeah, of course, it's the Earth server, it's not the Fusion server, and vice versa. So don't take everything that it says with absolute literacy, but it's a very good tool that will go through and kind of scan your system and give you a lot of potential problems. So other troubleshooting steps that we have. One is just to start and stop the services. So let me walk through the starting and the stopping. And again, as root. So I'm going to stop the Fusion process. So it's GE Fusion. Let me raise that up a little bit so you can see the command more clearly. So etc init.d GE Fusion stop. So we'll stop the Fusion server. And you'll see that two processes shut down, right? I have the resource provider and the system manager both stopped. And now I'm going to start them. And two of them started. So that's what you want to see. If only the resource provider started and the system manager didn't, then the Fusion server thinks that it's a slave. It doesn't think it's the master server. So when you start and stop Fusion, just make sure that you see two things shutting down and you see two things starting up, and that means that chances are that the Fusion system is up and running and happy. The Earth server same way. So we can stop that one. Sorry, G server stop. So we can stop the server, and it takes a little bit longer than the Fusion, but you should have no errors. We should see the server shutting down cleanly, and then the same thing when I start. We should see it starting up cleanly. Look at these errors carefully. Look at these messages carefully, because oftentimes you'll see the Earth server, it'll have one warning that says it can't find a particular database that's published, or some process ID didn't shut down. So you should be able to look at this carefully and see that it started up without any errors at all. These should just be purely informational and not any kind of error message. Typical error messages that you will get, one is that we're running a Postgres database on the Earth server, and you'll see something about a process ID. Sometimes the database doesn't shut down cleanly, and so the database isn't running anymore, but the system still thinks it's running. So you might have to go delete the process ID file, or you'll have errors that say it can't find a database that's been published. So if you've published a database and then somehow mistakenly deleted it by accident, the Earth server won't be happy about that either. So just start and stop the services just to look at the error messages and make sure that they're coming up and down nice and clean. Another tool that we have that's really handy just for general information and some troubleshooting is GETop. GETop just comes up and tells you everything that your Fusion server is doing right now. What databases it's building, what resources it's building. And so sometimes you'll bring up GETop and you'll see processes that are waiting forever. And they'll say that they can't make a reservation, or you'll just see like nothing is actually happening, but there's resources that for some reason are waiting. That usually means that you're either out of disk space or that there's some other issue with your system. So if you're wondering, why is my database still building? I started it yesterday and it's not done yet. Just bring up GETop and it will show you exactly what's building, exactly what's processing right now. And then, if you're seeing some kind of error messages, you could then send those error messages to the support portal and we can help you figure out how to move forward. Another very handy tool are your log files. A lot of times we'll hear customers saying, I can't connect to my Google Earth server, or my Google Earth server must be down, or there's some problem with Google Earth server. There's Apache log files. So your Google Earth server is really nothing more than an Apache web server. So you've got an Apache web server running, and it creates a lot of log files. So we can go to opt Google GE HTTP logs. So this is where your Apache logs live. And if I go to that directory and I do an ls, you can see that I have an access log and an error log. Those are the main logs that we'll be looking at. And the access log is really just a bunch of listing of all the activity that's on your Apache server. So all of these post commands are from the Fusion server where you're publishing to the Earth server, and then you can see stream server publishing going on. And higher up we had some get commands. So this is, if you look at your Apache server, you can see, is my client actually able to talk to my Apache server? Does the server even see the requests coming from my client? If you're saying that you can't connect to the Earth server from your Google Earth client, the first thing I'd say is, well, look at your Apache logs. Is it even trying? Is there even any record of that client coming in and talking to the server? And then you can see all the different GET requests. So you can search by IP address. We can kind of look and see whether or not you're actually getting any traffic back and forth from your server. Things like search tabs and queries and fetching KML files from your Earth server, that should all show up here in the Apache logs. We also have an error log that you can look through to see if there's any specific errors that are coming up. And this might tell you if your client is asking for something that doesn't exist on the system, you'll get an error. So take a look at those different log files. Speaking of log files, the Fusion server also creates a number of log files. And so here's an example. I have an imagery resource that's blocked. And you'll see that. Anybody who's worked with Fusion for any amount of time will have seen something that's blocked. And so what do we do here? How do I move forward from this kind of situation? Well, right where it says blocked, if I double click right on that blocked, it brings up the entire tree of processes that have to happen in order for you to build this resource. So Fusion has done all of these individual tasks, and there's a whole bunch of little tiny tasks. But if I keep expanding, and I keep expanding these, eventually you'll see these that say failed. And this is the one that you really have to look at, okay, because something failed. And if I have one task that's relying on a failed task, it will be blocked. I'm blocked because I'm waiting for this failed thing to get fixed. So right here where it looks like a little page, that's the log file that Fusion created for this resource. And if I open that by just clicking on it, this will tell me the actual command. Okay, this is why it failed. And in this case, I have two images in the same resource, but the images are different from each other. They're a different resolution or a different projection. And Fusion isn't like that. So it'll tell me that I have incompatible number of bands. So one image probably has one band and the other one has 3 bands. So I want to take this log file, and this is what I can copy and paste and send to the support portal. You know, if I can't figure it out from the actual command or the actual error, now I can take this and copy paste and send it to the support portal and get some support. Finally, one of the tools that we have for debugging, we have something called GE Query. And then in this, so if I just hit GE Query is a command that lets me get a bunch of information about a project or a resource or a database. So I type in GE Query and then the name of the thing that I'm trying to get information about, and it will tell me the status, how many versions have been built, the dependencies, so every single thing that is required in order to build a database or a project or a resource, the files that it's made of. So if I go back to this thing that's blocked, and it was under Resources, Imagery, and it was called South SF. So I should be able to go to GE Query, look at the blockers for Resources, Imagery, so it says that it's failed, right? I have something that's failed in there, and this is the blocker. I can also do -- status, and it's blocked. I can do the versions, and it tells me that I only have one version that's blocked. The in files are the files that are needed to create this thing. So those are all the files that are in. Then you can see this one down here, the 15 meter. That's the one that's causing it to block because the top 4 images are really identical, and then I threw in an oddball image that is causing it to block. So GE Query is just a nice general purpose tool, and it's especially important, or useful I should say, if you have an imagery project that has thousands of files and one of them has a problem. Sometimes that creates a cascade of blocked, 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 and failed. So one little image deep down in there can cause a cascade of failures. With the GE Query command, you can quickly identify which one is having the problem, and we can actually run GE Resume to resume the other ones that didn't really have a problem, but they just got blocked because of this one little failed thing. So a combination of like GE Query and GE Resume can be used to sort of get your project back up and running again. And those are the basic troubleshooting tools that it seems like maybe half of our tech support tickets would be beneficial if you could use some of these troubleshooting tools to help us help you, and maybe even for you to find out what the problem is and solve it yourself. Thank you.